Hey everybody, I'm Amanda with DevExpress and welcome to 16.1 Webinar Launch Week. Today's webinar, What's New for Windows Developers, presented by DevExpress CTO Julian Bucknall and DevExpress Technical Evangelist Paul Usher. In today's session, Julian and Paul reveal the new products and enhancements shipping inside our updated WinForms and WPF subscriptions. This session is being recorded and it will be made available on our DevExpress YouTube channel later today. We will also do a live Q&A at the end of this presentation. Just type your questions in the GoToWebinar control panel at any time throughout the broadcast. All right, thank you so much for joining us. I will now hand things over to Paul and Julian.
Thank you, Amanda, and good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first of our version 16.1 presentations this week. And of course, I have the infamous Mr. Bucknall joining me today. So good morning, Julian.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to, as Amanda says, the first in our series of webinars, What's New in version 16.1? And today we're talking about Windows, or Windows thick clients, or something. I hope.
Many Windows things. So, question, Julian, is it launch week?
Good question, Paul. I'm putting my CTO hat on now and saying it's very close. I don't have an actual date for you, but we are very close indeed.
But we do have some news we can share, don't we?
Of course, yes. And we'll be showing you some of the things from the beta, what's coming up in 16.1. I don't have an actual date for the release, so stay tuned. It should be announced pretty soon, I would say. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background, let's put it like that.
There certainly is. But I was thinking about the fact that I think, are we not releasing a beta update today?
Oh, you're quite right. If you're already a Universal or DExperience customer, you can go to your download page and download Beta 2. It was released half an hour ago, something like that.
Yeah, which is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Julian, this will be my 7th major release that I've been involved with at my time here at DevExpress, and I'm always amazed at what customers manage to ask for by way of new controls or new features. And when you come to think about the fact that we support 7 major platforms, as you mentioned before, that's a lot of work going on in the background.
Indeed, and I'd really like to emphasize what Paul just said. A lot of what we do in a release, in a major release like 16.1, is driven by our customers. It's your feedback which gives us ideas, gives us thoughts, gives us a way of going forward with the controls, with the platforms, and with our suites to make them better for everybody, essentially. I'd have to say, though, unlike previous releases, with 16.1, we've actually concentrated more on improving and enhancing the current controls rather than producing a lot of whiz-bang new controls. I suppose I'd have to say these days new controls are going to be fewer in number with each release. The problem, such as it is our customers, our customers, expect full-featured controls from the get-go rather than maybe an initial restricted control that then gets refined as we go through the versions. Now, we've been rehearsing this webinar, so we've talked a bit about what we're going to show today, and a fine example of this kind of control is the PDF viewer. It took a little longer than a single release to get the PDF viewer to where it is today. Wouldn't you agree, Paul?
Well, I think given the fact that you've got a 5,000-page PDF specification, and I think it really does highlight the fact that, you know, long after you pull off the covers of that shiny new toy, there's still a lot of work going on behind the scenes to continue to enhance that. And the PDF control is certainly one of those things. For example, in 16.1, we're looking at things like support for JPX. We're looking at group transparencies, things that don't necessarily mean a great deal from a UI or visual developer, but make a huge difference in the life of the product and where it can be used. And for example, the PDF control, in its short little life that it's had, has already become one of the most performant PDF viewers on the market, both in terms of the ability to read documents, write documents, render documents. It's a lightweight control, and in actual fact, I was talking to a client this week who've chosen to replace Acrobat Reader in their entire organization with a custom-built PDF viewer based on just the sample that we ship in the demo center for PDFs.
That's amazing. That's pretty good. So yes, for example, with the viewer, we're supporting more and more esoteric document elements. JPX files? JPX elements? Yeah. Anyway, without further ado, let's talk about what's new.
Well, obviously we're going to be looking at WinForms and WPF, and if we keep with tradition, I'll be doing all the hard work with WinForms, and you'll just keep peeking and saying, oh, that's in WPF. So,
yes, indeed. The two platforms are working together, shall we say. So they're releasing new features and enhancements at the same time. But go on.
So I'm going to throw a quick curveball, because I'm actually going to talk about Windows 10 apps, or UWP, for a second. It's one of those markets, and I hope we can get some feedback either through the chat window or through surveys or even emails, whatever, back to us. But there's certainly uncertainty, about the Microsoft mobile platform and where that's going to head. And when I talk mobile, obviously Universal is more than just mobile. So I'd love to hear feedback as to what the developers out there are doing in terms of that. But obviously we've got a commitment to our products, and the Windows 10 controls did not get missed out on this update. So I'm just going to mention them here, the new things and changes to the actual controls. So version 16.1 is shipping with a new splash screen control for anybody working inside that platform. We released as a community preview last year the color schemes, and we're pleased to announce that with 16.1 that is going to be its official release, and also includes full templating for standard controls to buttons, combo boxes, etc., as well as a built-in support for dark and light themes. Now, there's been some work done inside the hamburger menu. It includes the ability to add a bottom bar checkbox and bottom bar radio buttons, as well as slide out submenus inside their own separate flyout panel. If your menu items become too big for the main menu, then we've introduced an automatic scrolling so that you're not limited to what you can actually display. And we've also added a view state adaptive trigger to respond to the view state changes in the menu as well. Mentions here ribbons and toolbars. This release actually ships with our new touch-enabled context toolbar control that you can use as a context menu inside a document, as well as a lightweight version of the ribbon control that was inspired by the Microsoft Mail app. And then there's a number of other enhancements inside the ribbon, such as new combo box item, color chooser, font editor, gallery performance improvements, etc. And we mentioned PDF before. The PDF viewer for this platform now has the ability to select text and images and copy them. Has support for file attachments, hyperlinks, and bookmarks. So there is a fair bit going on behind the scenes or with those controls for Windows 10. And again, I'd love to hear some feedback for people that are using them in that particular platform. Now, whilst I'm not going to run through any particular demos on that, what I will do is just point out that the actual demo center itself can be run from your apps menu. I have mine pinned to the bottom of the screen here. And if you were to run the Windows 10 apps demo and run the examples, you could actually get straight in and take a look at some of those things that we've been talking about. So hamburger menu, you'll see that if I run the right application here, you can actually get to these checkbox items, the radio buttons, you can see the fold out, the slide out. It's all there for you to play with. experiment, and of course, as with everything, we ship full source control, ship full source code with all our demo applications. And that source code is always in the same place. Just open up your Explorer, go to your C drive, users, public documents, and there you'll see for each of our versions the demos, and you can drill into the actual source code components. And that's whether you're a licensed customer, or I believe, Julian, even in the demo installs, it's supported.
That's correct. The evaluation version or the trial version, you get all of the compiled demos, and you also get the source code for those demos as well. So you can see how we use our own controls, what kind of code needs to be written, and how to implement an application such as the demo.
So we'll move on to WinForms. And I know that there are a lot of customers still out there using WinForms. And in this particular release, we've got a couple of new components. I'm nominating those with the asterisk. And then we've got enhancements or updates to a number of other components. We're going to take a look at the new tree map control. We've got something called our unbound source. And then we'll step through, as I said, the individual components themselves with that. Let's just talk about this unbound data source or unbound source for data-aware controls that's being released. What you've got to do is think about this in terms of the control you want to use when you don't have a data source. It might sound a little tricky, so just try and stay with me here. But think about the scenario where you're working with some ad hoc data, and it could just basically be a list of a particular class type. And in essence, what the control allows you to do is supply any data-aware control, such as the grid or anything that can be bound to, with some custom unbound data, but in a centralized manner. Now, no, it's not going to try and replace unbound columns in the grid control, but instead it's going to provide a much cleaner way to push or pull unstructured, unbound values. And it does that by way of a couple of events. So you receive an event that you can push data through to the control, or if something gets updated, you can receive an event back. Now, binding can be done in a number of different ways. It can be done at design time or at runtime. And it basically removes the need to work through some of our older knowledge-based articles to try and work with unbound structures with our bound controls, or with any third-party bound control, really. Best thing to do when you start looking at the documentation is have a play with it. There's definitely some examples. And it's going to be one of those things, I think, where if you've ever come up with a scenario where you needed to do something a little bit outside the box with your data binding, this will fill the gap. Obviously, if you haven't, it'll just be one of those plethora of controls that sit in your toolbox that you think one day you might get to. What I'll do now, I think, is jump over to the demo center and start looking at some of the other controls or other changes that are happening inside 16.1. I'm going to launch everything from the WinForms demo center here. I'll try and keep things clean by removing other boxes. And we'll start by taking a look at what I mentioned before with the tree map. Now, the easiest way to describe a tree map is to think of it as a visualization tool for hierarchical information. So, like a tree structure. And it does that in the way of nested rectangles. One classic example would be if you're doing a look on your hard drive and you want to see how much space is used within folders, but of course you've got nesting within nesting. So if we take a look here at this example, we're looking at world billionaires, and we can see that we've got grouping by by country, so United States, India, etc. And inside that, the volume of the data is then represented by an approximate size or a proportional size of a rectangle. So Bill Gates, if I hover over, it's going to give me a nice tooltip to give me the numbers, was worth $53 billion, whereas Warren Buffett, $47 billion. What's really nice here is taking that same information and then changing how it's grouped or categorized. So this time I'm going to go by age. The actual countries have disappeared, and now I'm looking at the age information. So it gives me something a little bit different. Same source data, I'm just able to represent it visually differently in a really quick way. Now we'll say by residence by age, and we're back to seeing the country grouping, and then we've got a subgrouping inside there. And of course, if I turn grouping off altogether, we can see how people are placed across the whole world. So visually, there's some really nice functionality. Take that into a dashboard scenario where you want to then work with selections. And here we've got three major elements. We've got the tree map on the left, we've got a world map on the right, and then a chart down below. Now at this point, I can actually click on individual elements inside my map. We can see there's updating the graph below, and the tree map itself is updated. We can see that China at this point has got the hatching to show us. If I choose Canada, again, we can see that. So there's a lot of interaction that you can do working with selections and making it come to life. At the same time, you could use colorizers to present that data in a much stronger visual way. Because I'm using grouping here, we can see that each group is using the same base set for the colorizer. If I take the grouping off, then it's going to change the way that that information is presented. I can step through and use different gradients, and it's a really nice way to be able to bring not only, we can see that JP Morgan Chase versus Citigroup both look large, so if I was just going to look for the visual element, it might be more difficult, whereas applying this gradient, we can see which one actually is the larger value based on the density or depth of that color. Now the data source itself can be a flat data source, or it can be a tree view or a hierarchical model as well. Let's move on and take a look at some other controls. Now, I mentioned the unbound data source or unbound source. Let's see what's happening inside the world of charting. I'm going to start the charting example here. And we've introduced 4 new series types. We'll start by taking a quick look at the stacked step area. Now, I understand that with GoToWebinar and the fact that we're streaming this, some of these animations may not look as smooth as they actually are. But on my screen, the rendering is just really, you'd almost think that we're dealing with WPF type stuff here or some other rendering as opposed to WinForms. But the animation styles that are happening inside here are really nice. So this is a full stacked step area. And then we've introduced the polar range and also the radar range area. Now, of course, that animation is something else I want to point out, because the animation feature is something that was released. Not only do you get to obviously work directly with the standard animation features that are set up there, you've got all these different ways of saying I want my point animation or I want my series animation, I want it to come in from the left, the top. You can also create your own animation types as well, simply by providing functions into that engine. So that's really quite powerful. And then the final thing to look at inside charts is a thing called error bars. Now, when we first started looking at this implementation, I wanted to be able to explain in slightly better words what error bars would do. So the error bar indicators, or they are error bar indicators, which simply means you can represent error or uncertainty inside your reported measures. So it could be that you need a tolerance, or you need to represent that there could be a percentage above this that is represented in error. And you can do that by way of fixed value, percentage, standard deviation, standard error, or by providing the values directly in your data source. You can work with the error bars themselves. You can actually turn the caps on or off. So this might be more familiar for some people. And you can nominate whether the direction is plus, minus, or both. So again, another nice addition. And of course, if we switch the series view to a point, you can see how that would work with a different style of chart. Moving along, let's jump in and have a look at changes to the data grid. Now, those that have been customers for a while know that the company really is built on the grids, etc., that we made. We're known for the power and the speed of our grids and the functionality and flexibility in there. So As far as new functions that were added to the grid, I want to point out one little feature in particular. I'm just going to switch this back to classic mode, and here we've got a grid with master detail elements. Now, if I scroll down here, it's simply going to scroll the grid and everything moves off it. If I want to work with the data inside, let's move down to this one, collapse that. If I want to scroll data inside this child, then I end up with 2 scroll bars. And we know that we've had a lot of people comment and tickets raised saying it's confusing. It's confusing the customers. Is there something we can do to minimize that? So the team have worked tirelessly again, and we've now got this embedded scroll mode. You'll see that the scroll bar itself has gone, and I only have the single scroll bar. But as I scroll down, you'll see that the child view is actually scrolled before the rest of the grid. So it works really nicely and prevents that much cleaner UI from that point of view. Now, whilst they were working inside the master detail engine, they've also been able to tweak it even further. In fact, they revisited the algorithm that's responsible for calculating the layout of those views and made it so that your apps are going to be even more responsive than they've ever been. We've also improved the horizontal scrolling and optimized scrolling bound calculators with all those rendering engines. So what that means for you is that the grid will render better, smoother, and work more performant, delivering yet again what you've come to expect from our grid controls. In addition, we've got the view card appearance. You can now modify the individual cards of a layout view, giving you complete control over the presentation of information to the end users. Moving now on to the diagram control. Julian and I were debating earlier as to whether this was ever officially released since its introduction as a beta. And where did we get
I must admit, I got confused. I don't know. I remember us saying this is going to come. It's going to be a community technical preview, a CTP, but I don't ever remember us actually announcing it was released. I remember us releasing it, asking for feedback on what people wanted out of a diagram control, and I'm sure we've implemented them, and some of the features and so on and so forth. But I had to look back through our blog posts and everything. I can't remember us ever actually saying it's there as a real fully released product. But now it's been enhanced.
Well, I think given what's been added to this version, we can consider it released. Yes, I mean, certainly the fact that you can drop the diagram objects onto a form and turn it into a fully fledged working Visio style application, as we do with our report designer, as we do with our PDF viewer, as we do with our spreadsheet control, is just amazing. And what we've been able to deliver in this update is SVG shape support. So SVG being scalable vector graphics, and you can now use those within the diagram control itself. So being able to import arbitrary SVG files and utilize them inside your diagrams as you'd expect. On top of that, the next, or probably more requested feature than SVG support, was the ability to print. So everyone, you can now print and export to raster directly out of the control. Now, what do I mean by export to raster? Exactly that. You can export in a format that you can take into other applications. You can print. You can also export to PNG, JPEG, BMP, and GIF. Is it GIF these days or GIF? Anyway, you understand.
GIF.
Now, on top of the SVG printing, exporting, you now have the ability to apply themes. So you can allow your end user to skin or you can skin the demo of the product for them. You can change the style shapes. You've got the ability of changing the page orientation and size, and you can customize the line jumps. We've made changes to the layout algorithm engine. You can now provide your own custom layout algorithm. You've got the ability to apply the layout algorithm to a portion of a diagram. So if you only want part of your diagram to be automatically laid out, you can do that. We've also introduced what's known as the layered layout. I'm not even going to try and pronounce the gentleman's name who designed this all those years ago, but you can do a layered layout as well. And of course, the beauty here is with the way the engine works, how easy it is just to manipulate a document. And I want to just show as well, say the product flow diagram. Here's a diagram that was based on some direct data. And you can see as I interact with the document here, it's automatically filtering the grid on the right-hand side. So I'll choose grains, my grid gets updated. Or I choose a customer, I get to see everything from that customer. So there's lots of ways that you can interact with that particular control. And of course, if you're working directly within your code, you can do your code first, or you can work from a visual designer. Moving along, the map control. I'm going to make a quick call out to that because I don't believe that Julian has this particular, well, he might have this feature in WPF, but he's been a little bit quiet in the background. We have added support for map services. What does that mean for everybody? Well, basically, both WinForms and WPF controls now support the WMS, which is a standard approach to obtaining mapping image data from online or internal services. We've also modified the Bing REST service support. So instead of being used on the now deprecated Bing SOAP API, it's using the Bing REST API. So you've got OSM search and geocode support available. As far as the mapping control goes, it also has DirectX 11 or Direct 2D support. So you can actually have the content rendered using that as well. There are a number of editors that have undergone changes, and one in particular that I want to point out before I let Julian loose on some of the WPF features is this ability to run the mail client inside a different locale. Just going to launch the client, and I'm going to select out of the options I have here in Arabic. And what we have delivered is a true right-to-left example of the mail client. Everything down to the way the menus are rendered, all of the options, all the features, and it's something that, whilst may only affect a small portion of your customer base, being able to support full RTL to any country that requires it, I think is an amazing feat. And Julian, it's something we've been working on really for quite a while.
We have been working on it for quite a while. I've certainly been saying a long time that it's a lot of work to do, and this has taken, shall we say, several releases to get ready to be able to be published. Because as you notice there, we have several, oh, you've just closed the window. We have several of our controls in this particular demo example. So we have the ribbon, so the ribbon has to be changed. We have the navigation on the side, on the right side this time rather than the left side. That has to be changed. The way the grid displays data, the menu. There's an awful lot of work that was required to be able to do this kind of right-to-left display. And I'm glad to say that here it is. If you need it, you really, really, really need it. If you don't need it, then it's kind of, wow, that's kind of interesting.
I definitely think it's wow. And having you go to the right-hand side of my screen for the context menu is just foreign to me, but I know that I've certainly got colleagues that will be able to make a lot of use of that.
Yeah, yeah.
And then finally is the scheduler control. So let's do a search on this one, scheduler. And There's a couple of examples that we've updated here. One in particular that I want to make a shout out to. This is what we call the reception desk. It's a good quick example of how you could utilize the scheduler control to look after an appointment or booking calendar for multiple resources. So whether this example is a medical one, you might be running an accountant practice or anything like that. But the idea is that you can add or remove people from the quick view by simply utilizing a list view control. And then below it, I've got a list of patients. So Bart rings up and wants an appointment. He wants it with Amelia. And when I drag that patient across, I can just be shown exactly where I can or can't drop it. This is just a lot of functionality that's already out of the box for setting appointment times, not allowing conflicting appointment times, etc. But I think it's a nice little example of how you can utilize that functionality between multiple controls and the scheduler. The other one that I do want to show you is the new agenda view. Now the agenda view, think of it in terms of providing a chronological list of appointments grouped by day. So here we can see that I've got 13th, 14th, 15th of July, and I've got each of my appointments in that chronological order. What's really nice, I'm going to select Mr. White, and straight away we can see that Mr. White has a rental out for across 3 days, and we can see that clearly just by selecting that, which is nice. As with everything inside the scheduler control, there are so many options to configure, but this is a view that people have been asking for, and so we're pleased to deliver it in version 16.1. I keep wanting to say 16.2, but that's not quite the way it works.
Another 6 months yet before we say that.
Now, Julian, I'm going to flick over to your screen, and
okay,
we can have a look at some WPF goodness.
Absolutely. So thank you, Paul, for the WinForms overview of what's new in 16.1. Excuse me. I shall be now talking about what's new in WPF, and a lot of these things, as we said earlier on, are going to be essentially the same things as in WinForms. So first of all, we have a couple of new controls for WPF, a new wizard control. This, we've had one for WinForms and even VCL for a while now, so it's well time we ported it to WPF. In essence, it's a control for creating multi-page wizards for your application. You're in charge of the page content, each individual page, such as the text, the images, and whatever. And there's also the ability to define page navigation depending on responses from the user. Next up, a small little control, this rating control. Simple one, allows your user to rate some item in your application. Fully customizable. You don't have to use the stars that we have. It supports fractional values if you need those, and works with touch, obviously. Grid control, as Paul said, grid controls are our business, essentially. Doesn't disappoint with new features. We've added scroll bar annotations. I'll show you that in a minute. It's easier to see than to describe. A much better method of sizing column widths proportionally rather than absolute pixel widths. Improved conditional formatting, enhanced formatting for copying to the clipboard. The diagram control we saw just now for WinForms, exactly the same things for WPF. We're doing those in parallel. Rich edit control now adds the ability to store and so to load and save document attributes. So those are the written by, created by, last accessed kind of attributes that you have with Word documents. We're compatible with both Word and Office OpenXML. And now you can iterate through the elements of a document or the objects in a document. So text boxes, image boxes, columns, those kinds of things. And we've added hit testing to so that you can identify objects that your user selects. Spreadsheet, pivot table enhanced, support for custom formulas for aggregated cells, data grouping, sorting by data area values. I'd even say better than that, we've added the ability to use custom data editors within your cells, and I'll be showing you that in a moment. Tree list or tree view adds the ability to export to Excel, and among the settings we maintain with the export are the state of each node, whether it's expanded or collapsed, the sort of the data, sort order of the data, I should say. Totals and summaries are exported as formulas, formatting, data validation, and so on and so forth. In essence, we have, for the past couple of releases, created a new export engine that we're importing into all of our controls to use the similar kind of export for across the board. WPF charts, new area chart types. Paul showed you those in WinForms. They're exactly the same in WPF, so stack bar, polar, and radar areas. And we have the unbound data support, whereby you provide the data source, and we basically fire off events when we need to read data or you need to write data to whatever is your storage for that particular data. So without further ado, let's see some of these new features in action, shall we say? And I'm going to jump straight into the demo for the, where are we? There it is. The demos application for WPF. And the first one I'm going to do is the quick and simple rating control. So here it is. We'll load it. As you see, it's just a bunch of stars, and your user can select, the rating to give whatever item this is showing. So I can click on the 4th star, and it gives me a value of 4. The items count, there are 5 items. Let's increase that to, I don't know, 10 or 10. Here we go. Currently, the rating control is integer only. I can change that to an exact, so we can now do kind of half. 5.5, how about that? There we go. So your user can, score you or score this particular item with a fractional value rather than just a complete value. You can change the stars to something else if you need to. That's fully customizable. Next, I want to show you the data grid and the scroll bar annotations for the data grid. And this is what I mean by the scroll bar annotations. Here we have a scroll bar on the right-hand side, normal place for a scroll bar, unless you're doing right to left. And within the scroll bar itself are little annotations, little blobs for important areas of, in this case, the grid. So at the moment I've got everything turned on, so let me just show, say, for example, invalid cells. So we're displaying a little blob, a little square, a little rectangle here to show that there is something of interest in this particular area. So let me drag that down to here, and as we can see, there are lots of different errors in this particular case. I'm showing invalid cells, so there's lots of errors in this case. So you, the user, can immediately identify where there's some issue that I have to look at. If I show search results as another example, I've just searched for the town of Reims in France, and oh, there's one here, and oh, in fact, there are 2 here. There's a slightly bigger blob. Now, to me, I don't know, we have this in Visual Studio, so us as developers, we see this all the time, but I don't know whether, what do you think, Paul? Would users go for this kind of display, do you think?
I actually think it's useful, Julian. I think in places where you don't want to apply a filter, or you want to come up with a way of being able to jump to specific rows or blocks based on that. Take, for example, I run a hire business, and I've got 50 items out on hire. I could use it to represent something that's overdue without having to filter, without having to sort. Visual Studio uses it for code changes. Like, there's so many different cases I could think of, and I can't wait for it to appear in WinForms.
All right. Okay. I'll accept that. I'll accept that. So scroll bar annotations, let's jump over to the rich text edit now. This is obviously our way of providing word processing to your applications, and we've now built in document properties into the documents we edit and save on your behalf. So document properties, here we have a document which is actually showing you the document properties of this particular document, but so that's the document, and I can click on this ribbon item, and here are the actual properties of that document. It's called document properties. It's in this location, size, such and such. Summary, I can give it a title in here. Here's my, well, it's not my name, but John Smith is the author of it. We have various statistics to go with those properties, when it was created, modified, printed, and so on and so forth. And even better is the ability to add custom properties to the attributes. And so I have a bunch of custom properties that have been added already here. So we have a custom property called checked by. It's of type text. We can change that to date, number, yes or no. And here's the value of that text. So here is a date field, date completed. And so we have a date value there, and I think I have something down here. Oh, yes, no field. Has it been checked? Yes or no, and in this particular case is yes. So there is a way to produce custom properties within the document attributes that you can save along with the document, and they will be readable by Word and so on. So document properties.
And you can do that in WinForms too.
And WinForms too, yes, indeed. Very good. Next thing I want to quickly show you is the document iterator or iterator. What we're doing here is we're giving you the ability to iterate through a document looking at the elements of the document rather than the actual text, say. So here is a header element. Here's a simple paragraph, for example. Here's something in bold, italic, and what we're doing with this particular example is converting it into Markdown. Markdown being a preferred way of simply writing text without having to actually say embolden things or italicize things. So Markdown is used all over the web. Places like Stack Overflow use Markdown as a way of quickly entering text with highlighted elements within the text. So here it's pretty simple. What we're doing essentially in this particular demo application is looking for relevant elements and then converting those elements, whatever they contain, into Markdown. So if I just wanted, for example, this to be in bold, this particular nonsensical bit of word, sorry, I meant to do this, duh. If I wanted to do this in bold, and then we actually do a change, oh, it's kind of confused with the way I was editing that, but here we are just showing you I can iterate through this document and see various things and convert it into some kind of Markdown. Document iterator then. It's also another good example of that is to have rich text in your editor and producing HTML. That's another good way of doing it. Hit testing. Here we're going to display a document, and as I move my mouse through this document, we're showing what element is underneath the mouse. So the element here is a word, and if you can see, we're actually highlighting the actual characters as well in the yellow. Some documents need this kind of thing, or some applications need this kind of thing for a document, and here we're actually giving you the ability to identify which particular elements are underneath the mouse cursor. Next thing, I'm going to quickly show spreadsheet, and here the custom cell editors for me are a pretty amazing way for you to create a form within a spreadsheet. So here we have a table of data. Nothing particularly surprising about that. But the interesting thing is these cells, to edit them, I can edit them as they are, but we also provide editors for these cells. So this one is a particular drop-down, so I can select something else. Aniseed syrup is grains and cereals. You never knew. Here I'm just be able to, I can change it. This one is numeric. This one is numeric with an up-down, for example. Here we don't have to ask our user to enter true or false in all caps. We just edit and say, oh, okay, we just have a checkbox instead. Date field, same kind of thing. I can drop down a calendar for the date field. Notice I use European standard, DMY, but it's actually displayed within the spreadsheet as MDY instead of DMY. Kind of interesting way of working, but that's me. So cell editors within a spreadsheet, I think a great way of providing a kind of familiar way of entering a lot of data within an environment your user is used to, and of course then you can export it to Excel if you need to, and so on and so forth. Just a neat way of editing data in a spreadsheet. Tree view is an interesting one. Scroll bar, we've got scroll bars as well, annotations as well. Data-aware export. This is an interesting one for me. Is we're replicating when we export to Excel, we're going to replicate exactly what this tree view looks like. So I'm going to export this with Western Europe expanded and the other regions collapsed. And so I'm going to export it to Excel. I'm going to call it this. I've already done this before, you may have noticed. And I'm going to open it in Excel directly. And here's Excel. And notice we export the fact it's a tree view. So we have expandable and collapsible nodes. Western Europe, the region is open or expanded. The other four regions are collapsed. And notice also we're exporting the cell formatting. So we have the same images and everything looks the same within the spreadsheet. And the other interesting thing is we're not just exporting this particular value, we're exporting the formula for that value. So straight away your spreadsheet that gets created is an exact replication of what the tree view originally was showing. So we have minimum, maximum counts, and so on and so forth. We're actually doing the right thing when we're exporting the data from this kind of tree view. I'd say that was pretty impressive. And it's also available in, oh no, this is WPF only. The rich text stuff was available in WinForms as well. So
sorry, I'm answering questions, not.
So that essentially was a quick overview of what's new in WPF. And Paul did Windows 10 or UWP and WinForms. This is the first webinar, or this was the first webinar we're doing this week. Today was what's new for Windows developers. Tomorrow, same time, same channel, is what's new for ASP.NET developers. Wednesday, it's reporting and dashboards. Paul and I will be doing that one again. And Thursday, what's new for HTML5 and mobile. So please, please, please do join us for each of those days, or for those days that interest you. And we'll be certainly showing you a lot more of what's new in 16.1. So, questions and stuff.
There's been a ton of questions, Julian. I think Amanda's answered all of them. Now,
excellent.
There's a couple of interesting ones. The number one question the question has been asked the most is, are we going to see scroll bar annotations for WinForms?
Oh, yes,
How
of
often
course.
do
I would think.
Well, not yet.
Well, not yet. No, not in 16.1. No, it's not 16.1. But certainly in the future, I would say.
It is something. Yeah, it is something that's been looked into. It's not in 16.1, but it's interesting how WPF now has a feature that's going the other way as opposed to the way it normally goes.
And it's also interesting.
One question
it's also interesting that people see the value of having scroll bar orientations, which is good.
Absolutely. Now, one question that I'm just going to throw out there: do you view WinForms as a dying art?
No, I certainly don't. That's a very broad question, I must admit. So this webinar has been mostly about Windows developers. So you're writing an application for Windows. So what do you write it in? Is it WinForms, or is it WPF, or are you just going to target
WinForms.
Windows 10? Yeah, I personally, I just use WinForms, to be honest, to be brutal. I'm more comfortable with it, you know.
Yeah, unless it's something you specifically need the presentation foundation for, I think WinForms is certainly the quickest, most flexible platform, set of controls to be using. And so my personal opinion, WinForms isn't going anywhere anytime soon. WinForms equals RAD equals profit.
I think you're right. I think with WPF, if you need something that WPF provides as part of the runtime, then go for it. And the one thing I know for sure is the things like vector drawing and all that kind of stuff, rather than raster drawing. WinForms great at raster drawing, but it assumes your screen is a certain resolution. And you know, we are trying to update our themes, or some of our themes, to be usable on very high DPI screens. WPF has less of an issue. So there's that too. I mean, here am I looking at a high resolution screen, and luckily it's PowerPoint, so you know I don't have to worry about it too much. But high resolution screens are the future. So WinForms is, if you like, you know, still part of the past in that sense. But when you're writing an application, yeah, I'd go WinForms, but that's me. I'm biased.
Now, because we answered one political question, there's other ones being thrown up here. But for example, Brian's just asked, how many more years should we expect continued development of WinForms and WPF controls from DevExpress? I can't see that there's any.
We're not going to stop. No, I can't see a stopping point. I can't see. You know, it's one of those interview questions. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Oh.
But I think pointing case is VCL.
Point of case is VCL. VCL, we're still writing VCL controls. We're still updating the VCL component suite. It's still the biggest and best one out there, and I can see that happening for WinForms. Let's put it like this, I can't see an end to it. I mean, WinForms works in Windows 10. Windows 10 is, quote, the final Windows, or you know, they're just going to keep updating it. I can't see WinForms going away. So, nope. We like it. Excellent. You like it.
We've had a number of people asking about what's new for XAF. Now, we don't actually have a webinar planned for that, but there is a ton of information both on the blog post and inside the What's New documentation when 16.1 gets released. Yep. And obviously, there's some really exciting things happening on the XAF platform. What's New webinar for Xamarin?
Oh, not at this stage, not 16.1, no. The thing about Xamarin is we were caught, like everybody, with Microsoft A, buying Xamarin, and B, releasing it for free. The biggest part of that, well, they're both equally big, but the biggest part for us is the releasing as free, because suddenly, because it's free, everybody wants Xamarin controls.
But on top of that, you know, we do know that we're investing back into that control market, looking at how, or the best way to approach it. Is Xamarin Forms the only way? Should we be targeting Xamarin native platform, control support, etc. So it's not something we're shying away from, but yeah, at the same time, there's nothing that we can share right now until that research, etc., has been achieved.
Correct. Yeah. So nothing for 16.1.
A question here on the MVVM framework. As far as WPF or WinForms, there is certainly improvements in the scaffolding. For WPF, we've now added Entity Framework 6 provider supports, and there are other enhancements for that. Unfortunately, there are so many small, I say smaller, I don't mean minimized as in complexity, but there are so many other things that get touched inside our releases that we couldn't cover them in probably a 2-hour presentation. Even this one, I feel sometimes is a just push everything, because there's so many things get added into our major releases. So yes, absolutely, there's updates for MVVM.
And in fact,
there are
the best place to go is hang on a minute. Let me bring it up on a browser here.
While you do that, themes have been updated. We've looked at performance in themes. There's been some changes. For example, Office 2016 is the default theme now for WinForms. So everything we're doing is touching everything.
So here's the address to go to: devexpress.com/new-2016.xml, and you'll be able to see. So, for example, WPF. You can see the various items. It's a continual scrolling list, essentially. So you can see everything that's new for WPF here, or WinForms here, and so on and so forth. So go back, come back. We'll get there. Dear me, this without the hash. There we go. So subscriptions new-2016.xml. And that is that. Hello, Amanda.
Yeah.
Hello, guys.
We are done. We are out of time.
We are.
Actually,
right on.
We could go on for another hour, but I think we're done for now.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. Like Julian and Paul mentioned, we do have several webinars coming up this week, and you can check out devexpress.com/webinars to register for them. Tomorrow, what's new in ASP.NET. Wednesday, what's new for reporting and dashboards, and Thursday, what is new for HTML5 and mobile. And like I mentioned previously, today's webinar will also be available, like all of our 16.1 webinars, on our DevExpress YouTube channel. I posted that link in the chat box. And that is it for this one. Thank you so much to Paul and Julian. Thank you all for joining us. And of course, thank you for choosing DevExpress. Bye-bye.